There's this one idea that, for so many people, literally splits the Bible into two completely different books. It's this huge misunderstanding that creates a battle between law and grace, or judgment and mercy. But what if that whole division is actually the great misunderstanding of the entire story? Well, let's dive in and find out. So, a lot of us were taught to see the Bible as this big two-act play, right? Act one is the Old Testament, this kind of grim story about super strict laws and God's harsh judgment. Then, boom, Act two, the New Testament, where grace suddenly shows up and saves the day. It sounds dramatic for sure, but is it really the story the Bible's telling? So this really boils down to one central question. Is the Bible a story about God trying out one system, law, and then just scrapping it for a brand new, better one called grace? This is the popular way of thinking, the framework a ton of us just sort of inherited. And this is pretty much how we're taught to picture it. Over on the left, you've got the Old Testament, and it's all boiled down to this ladder of human effort. You're trying to climb your way to God's favor through laws and works. And on the right, the New Testament is seen as this pure gift that just comes down from heaven, and all you have to do is have faith. It's a really neat and tidy package, but the sources we're looking at argue it's actually deeply misleading. But what if that neat little division is the very thing that's making us miss the point of the whole story? What if, instead of two competing narratives, the Bible is telling one single, seamless story from cover to cover? The key to unlocking that unified story, it turns out, is totally redefining how we think about grace. Okay, so let's get right to the heart of it. If we're going to see this one unified story, we have to start with a much better definition of grace, one that's actually built on the entire Bible, not just one half of it. So check this out. Grace isn't just about forgiveness when we mess up. It's God's initiating favor. It's the first move God makes to reach out to us, before we've done anything to deserve it, good or bad. It's the totally unearned gift that makes a relationship with Him even possible to begin with. And this sequence, it is absolutely crucial. You have to notice the order. Grace always comes first. It's God's move that opens the door for any kind of human response. So what that means is that faith isn't something we use to buy grace. Faith is our response to the grace we've already been given. All right, so with that new definition locked in, let's put it to the test. Let's jump back into the Old Testament and see if we can find this pattern of grace, this God moves first idea, long before the New Testament ever gets started. The story of the Exodus is a perfect case study. I mean, the timeline couldn't be clearer. First, you've got the problem. Israel is stuck in slavery. Then God steps in with this unprompted, powerful rescue. That is pure grace in action. And it's only after that rescue, after they've already been saved, that they get the law at Sinai, which is basically a guide for how to live as a free people. This quote just nails it. Israel does not obey in order to be redeemed. Israel obeys because it has already been redeemed. See? The law wasn't some ladder they had to climb to earn salvation. It was the instruction manual for a people who had already been saved by grace. This one idea just completely flips that common misconception on its head. And the Exodus is not some one-off event. This grace-first pattern is woven all through the Old Testament. I mean, think about God choosing Abraham. It wasn't because Abraham was perfect, it was a pure act of initiating grace. All the big covenants, they're built on God's generous promises, not human performance. Even the sacrificial system was a provision of grace. It was a way for people to get back up after they fell down. So, if grace is already the engine driving the whole Old Testament story, then what happens in the New? Well, the argument is that the New Testament doesn't introduce grace for the first time. What it does is show us its ultimate fulfillment and its massive expansion. Yeah, let's be super clear on this point. The New Testament isn't some kind of plan B. It's the grand finale of everything that came before. The grace that was shown in promises and rescues and covenants now shows up in a person, Jesus. It's not a different story. It's the same story turned up to 11. And here you can really see the scale of that expansion. The story of grace, which was once focused mainly on the people of Israel, just explodes outward. Through Jesus, God's initiating favor is now extended to people from every nation, every tribe, every corner of the earth. So what about obedience? Does grace just make it irrelevant? No way. Absolutely not. Just like in the Old Testament, obedience in the New Testament is seen as the natural, loyal, grateful response to getting this incredible, unearned gift.
Grace doesn't cancel our response. It's the very thing that makes a true response possible. So when you start to put all these pieces together, that big, thick wall that people so often build between the two testaments, it just starts to crumble. And what you see instead isn't two different stories, but one amazing, consistent story, seen with totally new eyes.
Let's just summarize this whole shift. The common way of thinking says grace replaces law, but a more unified view shows that grace is the very foundation of law. The common view says obedience is how you earn favor. The unified view says obedience is how you respond to favor you've already been given. It's the difference between seeing two competing systems and one grand, unfolding story. So, if you take away just one thing from all this, let it be this. Grace is not a New Testament invention. It is the unifying thread woven through the entire biblical story, from Genesis all the way to Revelation. It has always been the engine driving the whole thing forward. And that kind of leaves us with a final thought to chew on. Once you start to see that grace isn't the enemy of law, but its foundation, it really makes you wonder, what other big ideas have we gotten completely backwards? What else could we see in a brand new light if we start looking for this pattern of grace everywhere? It's definitely a question worth thinking about. Thanks so much for tuning in.